PG&E's monopoly territory is home to 17 million people. It's bigger than most state
families already struggle to pay their bills.
PG&E was convicted of 91 felonies.
Really? I mean, what's next?
Greybeard Talks Solar. He is SolarWise.
Welcome to the channel. Welcome to Greybeard Talks Solar, the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you being here. Please like, subscribe, and share if you find the content compelling, interesting, and furthering your solar knowledge, helping to make you solar wise. So thank you for that. Today's show is going to be all about understanding whether or not you're dealing with a solar company that's going to be in business long term. There's a lot of solar company failures that have occurred in the last 2 years. And as a solar broker, it's something that we're constantly vetting, constantly researching, and trying to make sure that we get ahead of, so that for us and our clients, we're not exposed to a company that's gone under. And I've learned quite a few things in the solar business in the last 5 years, and things I think that I can help you to look for as concerning signs, red flags, something along those lines, that the company that you're working for or working with potentially could be a company that no longer exists at some point in the early near future. So strap yourself in. Should be a good show today. So first things first, let me kind of define as a solar broker how we gauge the size of companies. So we define a solar company as being a small company if they install under a couple hundred systems a month. So think 200 or less. That would be considered a small solar installation company. Could be a company that's local to you. Could be a company that's in your certain city or certain area, somebody that you're familiar with, and based on the community size or how sized this particular company is, they might do under 200 projects. Now, for most lay people, they hear the idea of 200 solar projects a month, and that seems like a really robust, very large company. But in the solar game, it really is not. And so the concern that you would want to be aware of with smaller size companies is that they don't have the same benefit of economies of scale. So, for example, they can't buy panels in the same bulk that bigger companies can. They can't buy batteries in the same volume or quantity that bigger companies can and get better pricing on the batteries or inverters, things like that. And because they're not in an area maybe where they can generate as much business as bigger companies, they're more susceptible to economic changes, seasonality changes, changes in interest rates, changes in consumer confidence relative to spending on something like solar. So the smaller a company is, the less financial weight or bandwidth they have to weather changing economic storms. So warning sign number one is, how much volume does a company do? Do they do, under 200 installs per month? And so based on my example, that would be the first thing to kind of investigate, to further understand. If you're working with somebody with a company that's a smaller size company, ask them probing questions about their pipeline, how many installs that company normally does, where they get their business from. So let me give an example. Let's say it's a smaller company. They do 200 installs or less a month, but half of that business is 18-month contractual obligations they have with new construction home building companies to install new home solar on these new construction homes or apartments. Well, that would give you greater confidence that they're probably going to be around because they've got these contracts in place and half their business is coming from sources that aren't going away anytime soon. So that's just one example. So we define a mid-sized company as a company that installs 200 maybe to 500 installs solar systems per month. So 500 and larger would be a large size company. And so let me skip from the small guys. We'll skip mid guys or mid-level companies, and let's go right into the large guys. The next place I have significant concern is large companies. So in this last year, you may have heard SunPower no longer exists, Infinity Energy no longer exists, Triton Energy no longer exists. Many of these companies were in multiple different states, multiple different jurisdictions. So I think it's actually a warning sign and a concern that I would have if you're dealing with companies that are in 5, 6, 7, 8 different states. And here's the simple reason why: resources and complexity. In the solar business, you have to deal with regionally centric jurisdictions. You have to deal with local cities and local counties, and every city and county is different in terms of their protocols, their time frames, how they respond, what they want to see, their peakiness. For example, let me tell you, in California, we deal with quite a few different counties, and each county substantially different. So, for example, in Placer County, where we do a lot of business, if a rural property owner wants a solar system installed, the county will normally be very easy to work with to get that particular permit done. If I contrast that, for example, with Fresno County, if we apply for a solar permit, somebody at Fresno County will take a look at the satellite imagery of that property once we submit that permit. And if they see any structures, sheds, outbuildings, stables, throw up, carport, something along those lines, anything that they're not aware of that they didn't get permit money on or a permit fee for, then they'll call that out and will not proceed with the solar until that particular unpermitted structure has been settled or the process has begun to get it permitted. So, this is just in California. So as you can imagine, the bigger the company is, dealing with multiple different states, different policy changes, different utilities, different jurisdictions, it just requires a massive amount of manpower. That manpower needs to be fed literally with project deals. And so the big guys out there, sometimes they're on the front lines of this very nimble act of trying to sell as many systems as they can to generate as much revenue as they can to then pay for their staff in 50 different warehouses. And so it's just a very complex game. And I think that it's concerning to me whenever I hear of a large company that's in 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different states throughout the country, how long they can sustain that type of a business model, how much resources, how much time delay is there, and what the ownership experience or installation experience is with a particular homeowner. That can be very complex. So what we found in solar as kind of the sweet spot where I feel like you get the benefit of economies of scale. So you get a company that's large enough that they can buy panels and inverters and batteries in enough bulk to get better pricing for you, is the mid-size guys, the 200 to 500. They're not so big that they're in multiple different states. They're not so big that they have 50 different warehouses that they got to pay the rent on every single month. But they're competent enough and large enough to get the benefit of better pricing on panels, batteries, and inverters because they can buy in bulk, and they know how to get the jobs done because they're dealing with a specific local regional portfolio of jurisdictions that they have already worked with previously and understand how to work with moving forward. So that's along the lines of sizing. So the first tip I'm going to give you is pay attention to the size of the company that you're working with and just be aware of the challenges based on the size of that company that they could encounter, and then that might allow you to ask a few more questions. The next thing I want to discuss, though, is something that's really more industry specific. It's something called milestone or M1 milestone payments. So let me give you a little backstory. In the state of California, for example, a contractor cannot collect in advance on work that they have not yet done. So in the solar game, a lot of the ordering of equipment and the engineering and design of the system and the permit qualification, all that stuff has to be done on their own dime in advance because effectively they haven't done anything yet for you as a homeowner. It's a construction project. They haven't shown up. They haven't delivered materials. They haven't done anything yet. So in solar, if you're a cash purchaser of a system, most solar companies are going to require a very modest deposit, maybe $1,000 as an example. And then they will wait to invoice you for the substantial portion of the remaining installation until after they've showed up with equipment and the system's been installed and it's actually shown to be operable, it turns on, et cetera, it functions. Then they'll invoice you for the substantial remaining balance. So these companies have to bear a lot of risk. They have to order the equipment, they have to pay for the design, they have to pay for permitting, they have to pay for engineering, they have to pay for their labor to get the equipment installed, and then they got to wait for you to pay them back. So with finance and lease contracts with solar installation companies, let's say a solar installation company that you're working with, you want to finance or lease the system, which means the money's going to come from someone else, some bank, some financial institution. Solar companies with that type of an arrangement with certain banks and financial institutions can collect in advance what they call an M1 milestone payment. effectively they can capitalize potentially up to 80% of that contract value to get that money in advance. The premise is the finance company is going to pay them to be able to order the equipment, to do the design and engineering, and to get the project ready for installation. So M1 milestone payments are pretty common within the industry, but I liken it to robbing from Peter to pay Paul, because here's a solar company that often is taking this M1 or advanced milestone payment contractually. They're taking it in advance under the premise that they hope the homeowner completes the transaction that they want to install the system, or that there's not problems with that timeline of installation. Because here's the rub. If they take an advancement on that contract, it's not an unlimited advancement. It has very specific conditions associated with it, mostly and most important of which is the time to install. So if that solar company, because of a jurisdictional challenge, permitting issue, Fresno County example like I gave you before, that jams up the project, they advanced on that contract, and maybe they use some of those funds to help another project down the line, or pay for the installation of, or permitting for 3 different projects, or order the equipment for a big commercial install. So they advanced money that they then spent on either operations or other projects, and now that financial institution, because they didn't get the project installed in a timely manner, now is calling that money back. They're clawing that money back. That action right there has been the demise of many a solar company in the last 2 years. It's the biggest reason that many of these companies have gone under, because solar is a very thin margined business. They don't make a lot of money on the install. It might not feel that way for you as a homeowner, but they definitely don't make a lot of money on the installation. And so they're dealing with very thin margins. And if they advance on that contract and they're using any of those funds to pay for anything else other than that particular homeowner's contract, they're in trouble when that money's called back. That's what put Infinity out of business, and it's somewhat what put SunPower out of business as well. Those multiple different states, big engine to feed, a lot of employees to cover the salary and expense on. And when a bank calls back $10 million, $20 million, $30 million worth of money that they advanced because those projects didn't get installed in a timely manner, that's those reasons that those companies really go under. So when you're dealing with a solar salesperson, you might ask them a question. They might be shook a little bit that you're asking a question about M1 milestone payments. But for those other solar guys that follow me out there, I mean, that's warning sign number 1. Does the company that you're working with advance on contractual agreements that they have with financial institutions to get that money in advance of the installation? And if so, that to me is a big warning sign. We won't, as a solar brokerage company, work with companies that do those M1 milestone advancements for that specific reason. The other thing I want to point your attention to as a homeowner is, if you're doing research, don't ignore Facebook, because there's been quite a bit of information that even I have gathered being a participant in several different Facebook communities. And so another warning sign with a particular installation company is if they're not paying their sales folk, if they're not paying their vendors, or, for example, if you start to notice that they're getting a negative reviews on Google or Yelp. That's another way, because older folks are going to go to the Better Business Bureau. I don't even look at the BBB. The only people that go to the BBB and post a comment are anybody that wants to complain. Whereas Google and Yelp allow an opportunity for homeowners to give praise and complaints, to give constructive criticism and compliments. So I think Google and Yelp are a better platform to evaluate the merit of what actually working with this particular company might look like. But if you start to see a trend in those Google or Yelp reviews where it's substantially negative, taking too long, can't get a hold of anybody, called them out 3 times, nobody's showing up. And then if you look at Facebook groups where there's lots of different Facebook groups where solar sales folk can gather together to encourage each other, because the business is a tough business, where they can talk about strategy and marketing ideas. And you'll also hear lots of comments on these forums, and you can even search for this, put in a particular company, or even ask the question in the forum if you become a member. But ask the question, what are your thoughts on this company? I'm thinking of working with them, or whatever. That can be a good platform for you to kind of peek behind the curtain and see what other people don't see, because it's well beyond the normal interface that you would have with somebody in your own home. So that's another example of some place that you can go. Look at Facebook groups, probe them, look at what other solar folks are saying. Do they sell? Are they not getting paid? If the solar sales folk aren't getting paid, then that's a big warning flag or warning sign to you that the company, because that's the point at which they have a lot of discretion, right? If they don't pay their sales folk, why are they not paying them? Because they need money to do the installation of other folks, or that they're behind on their equipment orders or something along those lines. So it's definitely a warning flag that you see that. Definitely another warning sign or warning flag if you start to see negative Yelp and or Google reviews for a particular solar company. And so as a solar broker, this is part of what our analysis is, and part of the reason why I've gone through about 30 different solar installers to try to find the 11 that we currently work with today. And I just want to provide some of that knowledge, some of that information, some of those resources to you to help you make a more informed decision. If you're a homeowner, we definitely don't want you to get stuck with the system that was installed by a company that does go under. Because here's the thing. I've actually had that happen to us once before, where a company that we worked with did end up going bankrupt. And here's the challenge. I had a homeowner that paid cash for their system, okay, had the system installed, and then 2-3 weeks after they passed their final permit, the company that they were working with went belly up. And it was a myriad of different issues, but effectively the company no longer exists. But my homeowner then some weeks later, about 2 weeks later, got basically a demand from the equipment supplier that had supplied the solar installation company with the equipment, got a demand from them to pay them the $12,000 because the installation company that had installed the system had not paid the invoice for the equipment that was installed on my homeowner's house. And so they got a lien notice, a contractor's lien notice, that this particular contractor that did not get paid from this failed installer was now coming after them, the homeowner, my homeowner, for the money that they were not paid and were due from the installation of that equipment. So effectively, my homeowner had to pay twice. They had to pay cash originally, got the system installed, but then they secondarily, to avoid this, basically lien against their house, had to pay again with the third-party vendor that had supplied the equipment to them. So that's some of the risk that's out there. So strongly encourage you to consider working with a broker if you haven't done so already. Secondarily to that, if you are doing it yourself or working with someone else, make sure you ask a lot of questions about the volume that they do, how many installations the company does, whether or not they're doing so on time. Look at reviews on Google and Yelp. Look at Facebook groups if you can. And then become better informed as to what you're getting into, because there is a lot of riffraff out there in solar. I like to say there's a lot of shady folk out there in solar. And if you're interested in working with us, all you got to simply do is text one word, solar, SOLAR, to 84503. You can also text YouTube to 84503 so we know it came from YouTube. But YouTube or solar to the 5-digit slick code 84503. We'll be in touch, and we'd gladly try to help you explore solar. From a knowledge base, from a wisdom perspective, we want you to have a lot of information before you make that decision. And thank you so much for watching the Greybeard Talks Solar channel, where a little wisdom goes a long way toward turning sunshine into savings for you. Don't forget to smash the like, subscribe, and share buttons. Stay charged, stay informed, and please keep shining. And we'll see you again next week when we drop another episode of the Greybeard Talks Solar YouTube channel.
Thanks for listening to SolarWise, Greybeard Talks Solar. Please visit our website, solarwiseco.com, to learn more. And we will see you next time on SolarWise.